So thank you. Thank you all for getting back together. 10-minute break. It was clearly necessary. Great moment coming up. We had some reference to research this morning when Angus Watt was talking about how rapidly this province is changing and how this is a province that finds solutions to problems. We got enough of them, and we're going to have more. This panel that's coming up next is going to give us a little bit of a glimpse of the future, some of the things that are being worked on that are critical for problem solving. So I'm not going to say much more other than the guy you know and know very well who's leading the pack is Russ Crawford. So Russ, you're on.
Thanks, Perry. Before I get into that, I've got a little project I wanted to kind of address here, which is the number of farmers in the room. It's important, I mentioned the last time I was up here, how important it is to get farmers attending these conferences. So with a show of hands, can I see how many guys are actually farmers in the room here? Cool, so about a dozen or so, okay. Well, I don't want to go around and count by acres. My point in asking that question is back to comments made by the ministry yesterday about getting yourselves organized with a commission. As the AHA, we've started that process, and we're making, sort of the preliminary discussions and investigations, but it's important that this initiative is led by farmers. It's one of the rules of setting up commissions. So one of those hands that came up, and I won't pick out anyone individually, it would be really, really wonderful if you said, I would like to take on a role and help move that forward. So I just leave that silently with you, reach out to Corey at the AHA and say, can I get involved in helping develop a commission for hemp in Alberta? It's the way we're going to get funding from the government and the way we'll move this industry forward. And the growth that we're talking about here, you saw some this morning, you saw some yesterday, supports that. It needs that. So this commission is an important next step for the industry. So I just wanted to kind of draw that to your attention this morning and plant those seeds, pun intended. Alrighty. What we're now going to talk about is a project that's been brewing for quite a while. We've talked about the importance of genetics and the advancement of the crop. And so we've been working at the AHA to, sort of dig into this concept to understand better what needs to be done. We reached out to ARDAR initially and said we need some funding and here's kind of our big, hairy, audacious goal idea that we saw the other day. This was ours, to say, how do we get a hemp genetics program? How do we get hemp varieties that are unique and specific to Alberta? Where do we find those? And to this point, we've relied on existing varieties from other parts of the world. Aaron is doing some great work bringing Ukrainian varieties to Canada for fiber. There's a breeder in Ontario who went around and dug up plants in the ditches from heritage hemp that was brought over to North America 100 years ago, and he's got a couple of varieties that were approved. We've brought in Finola, we've got some local breeding, but most of it has been other varieties. So how do we find varieties that work really well here in Alberta? So that conversation has been carrying on, and at the same time we're talking about building and opening markets. And how do we access markets in a larger scale than the niche markets that we're getting at now? The answer is to reduce costs. So why is this important? I'm going to talk a little bit very quickly about market, demand, and price. I'm going to talk about why genetics are important without getting very scientific, because I've got experts here to do that. I'm going to just go back and look at the Canadian Hemp Trade Alliance Trade Frictions Report, and then we'll talk a little bit about where we're at with respect to our programs with ARDAR. So really simple, economics 101. When the price of something comes down, the demand increases. And that's the challenge that we're facing in hemp. When you go out there and you say, well, we're paying farmers 50 cents a pound, 80 cents a pound for conventional seed, or $1.50 a pound for organic, whatever those numbers are, the market's this big for that at that price. But if you can get those costs lower, the market becomes this big, and so on and so on. So the challenge is, if we're ever going to get a large enough demand for the product at a reasonable price, we've got to lower that cost. And so that's where genetics come in. That's the idea of using the genetics technologies to increase yields and lower the price without interfering with the return per acre to the farmer. So I've got here an historical trend of other crops, and hemp has certainly fallen behind, but due to that prohibition for 60 years, when it was illegal to grow hemp, and so it was other crops kind of evolved more logically and through that breeding technology. And it's all about genetics. And the winner in this is corn, obviously. You can see the growth in the yields from 81 to 2001, or 51, I should say, to 2001. So that's 2011. That's that 60-year period where we couldn't do anything with hemp. But look what the other crops have done in terms of their average yield. There's tremendous growth, and there's a great more profitability for all sectors of the industry, whether it's the producer, processor, all the way through. The second thing that happened that kind of twigged my memory on this was that we were working with the Canadian Hemp Trade Alliance on talking with the industry and asking them the question, what are the biggest barriers that you're facing in terms of success in the industry? And we did a survey. We talked to processors, we talked to producers, and we talked to industry stakeholders. These are the top 5 that came back in order of priority. No surprise, government regulations was number 1. And that's where the Canadian Hemp Trade Alliance is addressing some of the problems. But the second and the fourth items relate to genetics. And specifically within Alberta, we talk about how can we improve the genetics in this province. So clearly it's an issue for both processors and producers, and that survey was further evidence of that. I just like that picture. I don't know why I put that in there. We reached out to Ardar, and Trevor Prout is in the room, and he's been a great supporter of us in helping provide some guidance and direction in how we approach this challenge. We went to him with a big problem, and he said, you need to get yourself organized. And I mentioned this briefly yesterday, but he said, start with the project, find out where you are, where you want to go, and how you're going to get there. And so with those words in mind, we developed what I call a phase 1 review of this. We submitted a report on all of this information, which is also available at, through the AHA if you're interested in getting a copy. And that's leading us to the next phase of the project, phase 2, which is the multi-year genetics development that we've envisioned as part of that phase 1. We were lucky enough in that process to find the right candidates. And I want to put a shout out to Wilson Johnston, who's not here today. He's with Blue Sky. For any of you who have sons or daughters in athletics and dance or whatever, if your kid makes it to the provincials and you're the coach of the team, that's where you go. That's how that works. So he couldn't make it. He sends his regrets, but Wilson was really helpful to me in understanding this problem. And he said, our market for hemp is immeasurable, he said, but not at this price. We've got to get the cost of that hemp lower, and we'll do that through improved yields. It was the number 1 driver. And so he painted this picture for me that we said, okay, that's the driver. He helped through that phase 1 of the project, and he was very instrumental in providing the recommendation to bring these experts together and form a team and move on. And fortunately, you've heard Verve's name mentioned a few times over yesterday, and they're actively involved in a number of different projects. And there's other companies that have been doing work in that field. I mentioned Aaron at Canadian Rockies. Inca has been doing some genetic studies as well. So there's a lot of independent work going on, but it can all kind of mold into this one solution or this series of varieties that we hope we would make available to all farmers as a kind of optimal varieties for this province in food and fiber. So that's the driver behind this. That's the messaging that's come out of our phase 1, and we're moving into phase 2 where we've gathered together the plan. And we won't talk about specifics of the plan because there's still discussions going on with Ardar. Unfortunately, I don't have any announcements to make today. We've had a couple of good ones, but we don't have anything to share at this point. But we wanted to talk to you a little bit about what we're doing and why. So I'm going to stop now and pass this on to Jeff, who's next. I wasn't sure who was next. And he'll talk more about Verve and about, you know, the kind of information that he can provide for you.
Okay, thank you. It's yeah, always a pleasure to come out to Alberta. I'm a Manitoba boy, along with Daryl. They're one of the first involved in hemp back in 1998 as a extension agent, really, for Manitoba agriculture, and that's where I kind of gained a lot of my agronomy knowledge on hemp at the time, and joined a company called Hemp Genetics International in 2015, and from that, here we are today, evolved into a company called Verve, because I had a vision and they had a vision, and it just happened to be the same vision, and so we kind of joined forces on that. But before I get into the presentation, and always sharing the stage with Jan Slasky is an adventure, and we've done this many times, and most recently in New Zealand together, but I always have to tell a little story about Jan because we spend so much time together. Just wait, you get the last microphone last, so just be quiet for a bit. So anyway, Jan and I are, as you might be able to tell, kind of getting up in years. We're the older grandpas of this industry now. And with age always comes medical issues, etc. So Jan was at the doctor getting his physical done for the year, and of course, as you can see, he's a prime specimen in his age and no problems whatsoever. But he said to his doctor, he says, you know what, I feel fine, but I'm really concerned about my wife. I think her hearing is failing. And he said, well, that's a sensitive subject. You know, we don't want to interrupt anything with your marriage, but perhaps you could do a little bit of a study to see how bad her hearing really is. And he says, okay. He says, well, go out when she's busy doing something else. Don't stand in front of her. When you're 5 meters away from her, ask her a question and see what the response is. If you don't get anything, then move closer. So Jan says, that's a great idea. He goes home, and his wife is busy doing something with her back to Jan. Jan's 5 meters away, and he says, honey, what's for dinner? And she doesn't turn around. She continues doing what she's doing. And Jan says, yep, 5 meters is definitely too far. He steps up a few more feet or a few more centimeters to 4 meters. Honey, what's for dinner? Again, nothing. Steps up a little bit further. Honey, what's for dinner? Nothing at all again. So he's right behind her, and he says, honey, what's for dinner? And she turned around and she said, I've told you 4 times already, chicken. And if you want another chicken story, ask John about New Zealand accents and chicken. But okay, so on to the presentation. The evolution of agronomy and hemp. This is just basically kind of what Russ has alluded to begin with. What's the evolution? Why even look at hybridization of a specific crop? This kind of goes through a bit of the timeline as far as how farmers began to use open pollinated seeds, how that was actually, back in its day, was a very, before larger companies, I guess, were established, you know, a fabulous way that farmer could save seed, plant that seed again, and he would be, you know, off to the races. But with the introduction of hybridity, the actual concept of higher yields and what we call hybrid vigor came into play. So we all kind of have an idea, and these are sort of the things that I just briefly talked about, the advantages of an open pollinated crop and some of the historical significances, again, being able to have farm-safe seed, which with our regulations in Canada, that's just not possible with hemp, and for good reason. You know, they want to monitor the THC levels, etc. So as a breeding company or as a seed grower that I am, I have to take those tests early on at the pedigree level, so breeder registered foundation status, so that when we hand off that seed to a farmer at a certified status, he no longer has to test that. So it took the burden off, both financially and just regulatory for that farmer. But what are the characteristics of hybrid crops? And I'm not going to go into too much of this. I think Jamie has some good explanations. So just kind of the whole, again, increased yield is the one and only thing, and that's certainly what we're looking at with this crop. But with increased yield, we can't double the yield of a variety that tastes like crap and nobody's going to eat. So working with Wilson and Blue Sky and Manitoba Harvest, all of the major processors and Alive, we want to make sure that we evaluate along the whole value chain. So what is hybrid hemp? And this was kind of mentioned earlier. I think it was actually one of the farmers. And we want to make sure that hybridity sometimes gets mixed up or is used in the same sentence as genetically modified crops. And this is not a GMO crop, and this is not a GMO crop, and this is not a GMO crop. So I've said it. Take that message and stuff it away where it should be. So hybrid also does not mean a dual-purpose crop. It's completely different. Without getting into a lot of the technical aspects of the breeding, it's basically a combination of a couple different family types of hemp, and the offspring is called heterosis, and that heterosis usually means that offspring has benefits over and above the parents that were used in that breeding. So when we kind of take a look at this, and many crops have gone through this already, and I'll try to use examples a little bit, but the importance of seeding rate, and this, of course, is going to have a huge effect. So in past studies, as my job as a research agronomist with Manitoba Ag, we found one of the biggest issues with hemp is the seed mortality, and which resulted in sort of our recommendation for seeding date. So we like to try to seed hemp in warm, moist soils because of that mortality issues. I often say that hemp is really quite a baby to establish. It turns into a monster once it gets to about 8 to 10 inches tall, and it's off to the races. But it's not as a vigorous type of a crop as one might think just looking at the stature when it's fully mature. So we found that the hybrid vigor can certainly decrease that mortality. And so what we need to do, I think, is start to set up, as we begin to develop these crops or these hybrid varieties, these hybrid lines, we certainly need to go across the whole aspect of the agronomy recipe to ensure that we can maximize the utilization of each of those seeds. So this is on fertility. I'm just gonna, basically this is a straight nitrogen curve that most crops have, and this is another kind of, not really a problem, but an issue that I've had with hemp is that I don't see that, as you can see, obviously the amount of nitrogen we continue to put on, that sooner or later the crop is going to maximize its yield and then starts to level off, and that's like we call the nitrogen curve. Hemp is a strange one too, because if conditions are right, I think the more ingredients that you put into that field, and if conditions are right that it can maximize or utilize those nutrients, it just continues to be more of a nitrogen ramp. But where we are right now, so this is just a good observation of nitrogen use efficiency between open pollinated and hybrid crops, and you can see the yield increase. And so that's the second part of what we really need to sort of evaluate as we roll out these cultivars is how do we maximize nitrogen use or potassium or phosphate use in the crop. So extremely important. And I'll just kind of briefly touch on the economic part, and I know Skermantis saw me present this slide at the Canadian Hemp Trade Alliances, and he's been a good friend for over 10 years now, or close to 10 years, and a business partner really in a way. But this is what we would like to take home. So another colleague of mine put this slide together where we're comparing essentially the other major crops with regards to let's say protein produced per acre. So if our average yield is probably slightly less than 1,000, but for easier math, I just used 1,000 pounds or 0.5 metric ton per acre as compared to peas at 40 bushel, lentils at 1,100 pounds, soybean. And you just go down the chart, so we got the maximum yield pounds per acre, the fats that are associated with each of those different crops, and then the interesting one is the protein percentage. So hemp has approximately 25% protein within the seed. When we start to do that, break it down to $1 per acre, if you take a look at the yellow column where we are right now, at $1.32, or efficiency, I don't know if you could call it $1.82, but essentially 1.32 as a factor, we're 4x of soybean, we're close to peas, but we're still much more expensive. Lentils the same. We're not even in the ballpark. And so as we start to look towards the Alives, the Blue Sky Ventures and Manitoba Harvest on increasing their customers, they're having a difficult time getting into the door. Like, we can pound the drum and talk about all the nutritional benefits of this crop, but if you're 4x the amount of a protein that they can get from another crop, you can't even get in the door. So this, all of a sudden, if we can double that yield to 2,000 pounds an acre, we're very much in that ballpark, and then we can have those conversations about the nutritional value. And it's not to diss any of the other crops. I'm all about, I'm a farmer. I'm not a strictly hemp farmer. I have hemp in my rotation, but I do grow peas. I do grow canola, and I mean, it's just really meant to be as a collaborative or a cooperative effort, I guess, as far as having hemp in that nutritional profile and at a price that makes sense for all involved. So we did, this was the very first hybrid that came out of the program. It was T3H 2006. You haven't heard of it because it does very well in the latitude of Kentucky and Texas, not Elk Point or Edmonton. So the slide itself kind of just shows the uniformity of what we've been able to produce. We did have this variety in South America. It was a top yielding variety by quite a distance, but just not meant for here. So we haven't put a lot of additional work into there. We're trying to get varieties that are specific to Canadian agriculture. So we have branded already. We're well down the path. We'll let Jamie and Jan Saskia actually kind of finish up on that. But that's essentially the basics of what we're trying to do, the reason that we're trying to do it, and I think it could certainly be an industry changer if we can have a hemp Cheerios on the shelf right alongside with anything else out there. So with that, I think questions will be for later, Russ, or however you want to do it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks, Jeff. Didn't really provide a very good introduction for Jeff, but I think most people know him already here. Our next speaker, Jamie Hunter, is also with Verve Seeds. I've just recently got to know Jamie, and it's really inspiring to see new people come into our industry that have the same kind of enthusiasm and energy that the rest of us have had for many years. So I know that his background is more extensive in hemp than I even realized, but I, again, feel really fortunate to have him as part of our team here. So I'll turn the mic over to Jamie, and he can go into his presentation.
Hey, everybody. Thanks, Russ, for putting this all together. I can just talk louder. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit today about how advancement in hemp genetics can help foster the industry. So what do improvements in genetics actually mean, and what should those genetics improvements in genetics look like? Russ had touched on where crops are as far as yield, and yield's one aspect of it, but a lot of crops look nothing like they did 100 years ago. Corn looks nothing like it did 100 years ago, along with many other crops. So we all know what hemp looks like today. What does hemp look like 20 years from today, after receiving some of the investment that some of the other commodity crops have got? I don't know what that looks like, but there's a process there for modernization, and we're going to go through it right now, and it's not a rapid, and it's not an inexpensive process. So we spent a lot of time talking to the processors, talking to Skermantis, talking to Spencer, talking to Daryl, talking to the users of hemp, Aaron Barr, and there's really two uses that are evident over the past 2 days. There's the food business and there's the fiber business, and then there's different business models that go along with that. The food people want grain type hemp. They want it short to the ground. They want high yields. They want it easy to combine. They really want to focus on the grain. Fiber people want the biggest hemp that you can get, which is really tall, really hard to harvest, and typically low yielding as far as seed. So it presents a problem, and then there's the model that's in between, which is dual use, which is something that companies like Inca are working at. How can we use the grain and use the fiber? And we think that's a beautiful model, and it does decrease costs, But to date, it hasn't really been driving investment decisions. It's been more one path or the other. So generally, it's a challenge. How do we increase yields on two very different types of plants simultaneously, rapidly, and cost-effectively? How do we do it? So as Jeff has just spent some time talking about, one way that we think we might be able to do that is through hybridizing the crop. So there's an opportunity here to address a bunch of these challenges through hybridization. Hybrids are obviously going to have advantages and disadvantages. And we're not here saying that hybrids are going to be the answer to every situation. If your sensitivity to seed cost is extremely high, it might not be the answer because it's a much more complicated production process. So in that situation, an open pollinated variety where it's just parent to progeny might make more sense. But we want to explore the opportunity to utilize hybrids. Yeah, the negatives are the expensive development and the expensive production of seed cost. The positives are increased vigor and yields on both the grain side and the fiber side. And the yields are what really drives the cost down through the whole system. So driving the cost down for, on seed production even produces lower cost seed. So if it drives the whole value chain down. So it's really, really the key. So what should be done? There's a lot of things that should be and could be done. We need to work together as industry to figure out what we want to do, and that's, I think, why we're on the board here, or up on the stage. Russ has been instrumental, and the AHA has been instrumental in putting together kind of the thinking group. Wilson was a driver of that. So we have an idea of what we think needs to be done, and we need to make genetic gains. But one thing that's undeniable is that we need investment, we need support from government, we need support from farmers, we probably need a commission, and none of the crops that you see today, corn, soybeans, all of those are still receiving government subsidy. People don't realize that. The oil and gas industry still receives grant money, still receives subsidy. It's a really important part to building an industry and maintaining an industry. So more or less till now, hemp's been going it alone. It hasn't had, the big dollar support that a lot of other crops got. So yeah, having the AHA, the CHTA, they're critical factors in advancing this. We need to lobby government, we need to develop markets, and we need to be in the room in front of the politicians and really be engaged. And this is important. A lot of people have mentioned that the U.S., has seen declining hemp acres, which is true. I don't think that's going to be true for long. Americans are really good at throwing money at a problem that can be solved with money, and they've been doing that. We're seeing a lot of investment in fiber processing specifically. So I think while it's still nascent, the investment's being made, and we expect to see a significant increase in U.S. hemp acres. And it's going to be driven by fiber, but it's going to produce grain, it's going to produce food, it's going to produce seed. And Canadians, we stand to lose our competitive edge, and we stand to lose some of our market share to the Americans. So yeah, we need to invest. We need to stay on top of it. We've been a leader in the business for 20 years, so let's just not lose sight of that. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jamie. We'll do questions afterwards, so I'm sure there's probably a few. I just wanted to kind of paint the picture for the next speaker. Good luck with that. But the driver behind this project was, or I guess maybe let me say that we were fortunate enough as we got into this project to come across Verve, who were already working on it. So they were partway down the road, and they said, here's our vision, here's where we want to go. And it aligned perfectly with what we imagine with the AHA. But when Wilson came back to the committee with his recommendations, he said, I think there's no one company. I think we need to look at a collaboration as part of our solution. And he proposed that we look at both a working relationship with Verve and with Initech. And when we went back to Verve and said, how does that sound to you? They were quite enthusiastic about it. There's been subsequent meetings between these two parties, and we think we've got the best of all worlds here. So I'm going to bring Jan up to the mic, and he'll explain to you exactly what Initech brings to this whole project as well, and the value that they provide, and ultimately the benefits that we're going to get in a collaborative approach to this thing. So I don't, like I said. Be patient with him. He had carrot ginger here yesterday morning, and then he shows up like this. So I'm not sure if. Be careful when you're drinking that stuff.
So good morning. Okay. So Jeff, thank you very much for not telling this joke about wife and husband golfers. So if you haven't heard Jeff talking about golfers, so don't ask him to tell you this joke, because some can be offended. So I just really appreciate that you brought the lighter version of me and my wife relationship. So great, yes. So Russ, thank you very much for explaining what we are doing here, just like why Inotech Alberta is involved in this undertaking. This is great undertaking. If you didn't get this message, that this is groundbreaking, this is something that, just like we are well positioned, and as I will be explaining to all of you, and this mighty duo, all the team that has been formed, we are just like set for success, right? Okay, so without further ado, I will explain you what we have done at Inotech Alberta over the last 22 years in terms of hemp development. So 22 years ago, I and my colleagues, we established a program, not a project, a program that we called From Gene to a Final Product that was composed or is composed of 3 R&D, research and development domains. So the first domain is feedstock development. So this is what we are, just like our project, or just this what our undertaking is mostly about. The next is fiber processing. Just as you could get from our previous yesterday's session, that just like Alberta is about fiber. We are the hub for fiber production and processing. And as I mentioned yesterday briefly, that we are one of the enablers of it. And the third research domain that we have within this third domain is biocomposite research and industry support. So for very many years, it was the only one in the world program like this, from gene to final product. Now, just like Jesse was talking about US, and they are just throwing money on R&D. They have like a cannabis research center, and cannabis means hemp in American language. We don't have any Americans here. But indeed, Australia is doing exactly the same. A federal Australian government is has put already over $3 million for R&D at the national level. We don't have something like that in Canada. So this project that, just this proposal, or just what we are aiming at, can, just like put us back here in Canada on the map. So just 3 domains. So the first is the feedstock development domain, and I call that we have 3 pillars of in this domain. First is gene discovery, gene expression analysis, high throughput sequencing, and I noticed that we have Dr. Jan Zhang here sitting in at the back table and reading email from me. And Jan was like, for very many years, he was like a key person working on in this gene discovery space in our feedstock development domain. Then we have the other pillar is breeding cultivars adapted to the prairies. Yes, breeding cultivars adapted to the prairies. That's what we've been doing, and I will explain you on the next slide for quite a while. And the third, of course, is agronomic studies. As we all know, just like hemp and, breeding and agronomy is like farmer's breakfast. What do you have, farmers, what do you have for breakfast, typically? Ham and eggs? Yes? Or you are just like eat hemp cereal? So, what do you have? Okay. Yes, if you sprinkle hemp hearts on it, by Manitoba, are they here in the? They went home. Okay, so verve seeds or just other hemp hearts. Breeding and agronomy, in my mind, is like a farmer's breakfast, ham and eggs. Just like you have to have both of them to succeed or to just perform well during your workday. So we are just like with this feedstock development domain, we have these three pillars. So quickly what we did over the years with respect to hemp selection and breeding. First, when we started this program 22 years ago, it was about evaluation of existing germplasm. And I can tell you, I just checked my notes, 20 years ago, 20, you got it, right? We got in Vegreville 45 hemp varieties, accessions, breeding lines. I am not aware of any other comparative studies done here in Canada on such huge number of hemp genetics. So we started from germplasm evaluation, and we were testing what is performing well here on the Canadian prairies. As Jeff or Jamie said, we are just like in the early days after 1998, we're growing European varieties, mostly European varieties that were bred and developed for different soil and climatic conditions, right? So we tested and identified some varieties that performed quite well, and we were focused on fiber production. We are developing and just zeroing on fiber varieties. Why? Because just like we already had finola in Canada, and coming from Poland. I realized that hemp fiber can be used, and hemp in general as a crop, can be used for more than this proverbial ropes and sails, as was mentioned during this course of today's several times. So I had this very fresh, just understanding that hemp, what value can hemp can bring to the prairies, to Canadian economy, and to Canadian agriculture. So we eventually started maintenance breeding of fiber variety called Silesia. Very many of you have heard of it. Some of you were growing it. I will show you a few pictures of Silesia. And we started breeding new varieties, both fiber and dual purpose and grain type varieties at Vegreville. So you can see here a picture. It's our Silesia nursery. It tells you that this particular variety brought from Poland performs quite well in Canada. So agronomy, we are doing small plot trials and fiber production. So we have on our farm that I will be talking about, we do both. We do just like a plot research, agronomy plot research, breeding, and as you can see, we are growing hemp for, what you will see on the next slide, for our decortication plant. So speaking about agronomy, just like we want to address emerging threats. Just when hemp came first to North America, and I was reading, and you can still read this. Hemp doesn't need, it's the best crop, doesn't need any fertilizer, it's not susceptible to any diseases, to any pests, just miraculous crop grows on just like a cement pot. It is not absolutely true, and as the acres are growing up, we started observing, noticing this not potential, existing threats. So here I'm just like, these are pictures taken last summer and summer before on our, in Vegreville and surrounding areas. So you might see just like aphids, you can see in the central panel, white fly, and lots of it on hemp. I'm not sure if you ever noticed. And this is how, just like plants, hemp plants look that just affected by viruses and viroids. So this is emerging. This is something that we as a R&D organization, what we've been really good and great on doing, de-risking future operations. So here I want to just introduce to you Dr. Peter Seruwaji. Peter can stand up. This is a new kid on the block. And Peter has been, thank you. Thanks for a warm Alberta welcome to Peter. Peter joined our team last year, just like a year with us, and Peter is an expert, globally recognized expert in viruses and viroids. And he can tell you, next time we are having a conference, Peter will be presenting to what, yeah, just like you're not aware of that, but you will. So we identified this year in our hemp variety trial pretty much all varieties that we are growing, existing our just variety from LOAC, were affected, impacted by by viroids. And you can see that this picture was one of them. We don't want to show you which variety is this, but it is a real problem that will be getting only more severe. Okay, so last couple of slides. We are talking, the next domain is fiber processing. So as very many of you are aware of our, I call it separation, Van Dommel or Cretus separation system. I specifically don't use decortication because decorticator is only one unit in our plant that results in clean bast and herd fiber. And very many of you, when I'm looking, we're using our plant. This is the only one of its kind in the world. And I confirm this Cretus, how is laid out and what kind of services this plant delivers to our industry here in Alberta, here in Canada, and we have also international clients as well. So we're enabling hemp fiber industry. For research purposes, we designed and manufacture ourselves a micro-decorticator. So if we are having testing new varieties, new genetics, we can decorticate, just like a single stem and subject to just our research purposes. So that was about, we do this for over 22 years. We are doing this, we've been doing this research, and we have great facilities to support our research. First of all, we have indoor facilities for hemp breeding. We have 18 compartments of research greenhouses, and Peter is using one of them, and you can see that there is some cannabis crop in the chamber that Peter is entering right now. And we also have 36 growth chambers. This is the largest controlled environment or growth chamber facility in Western Canada. We control temperature, light, humidity. In some chambers, we can control CO2. I'm almost done, Perry. So keep this in mind, that this is what not very many organizations, and actually we are just having universities and other research organizations coming and trying to have access to our facilities for their needs. And last but not least is our research farm at Vegreville. So this is we have employed drone technology, obviously. So a picture taken last summer. We are sitting on 460 acres of land. Typically, per year, we have 4,000 plots, research plots, in addition to commercial acres, just of hemp and some other staple prairie crops. And we have irrigation, so we can irrigate our plots, or if needed. And apparently, it will be a great need this coming summer, right? That's what everybody is talking. So our irrigation system will be very useful, and we have all plot equipment, small plot equipment, and just commercial farming equipment as well. So to conclude, I would say that at Inotech Alberta we have just a long history of working with hemp, breeding hemp, and just testing hemp. And we can do it in winter, as you can see in here. Sometimes our variety is taller than the telephone pole, as you can see on this picture. The proof is in the picture, right? The picture is worth more than how many? 1,000 words, right? No, it's an optical illusion. No, you're doing fine. But we are getting there. So sometimes our varieties, we can reach for the sky, and we need to use a ladder to get to the sky with our hemp varieties. With that, thank you very much.
Have we got time for a question? Any questions? Does anyone have any questions for our group here? I think you can see we're very fortunate to have some great experts, some great resources. We've tapped into a very timely project, and hopefully we can help get us across the finish line. So that is our goal here. I guess we got a question from Skermatis. Go ahead.
Yes, just a quick one. So we need that hybrid. How far are we from it in terms of resources of time and money? If there was a grant, let's imagine, right? How big should it be, and how long would it take? Thank you.
We have proof of concept on hybrids, essentially doubling, at least increasing yield by 50%. The question is geographic adaptation, and literally plant breeding is a numbers game. It's statistics. So the more money you put at it, and the more plots, and the more test crosses, and the more things, the quicker you'll find what works in that geography that actually doubles yield. You could have a hybrid or a variety that does astronomically well in southern Alberta and yields 3,000, 4,000 pounds an acre. That same variety will not do anything in 4 per million. It might not even flower. So the answer is the more money, the quicker it happens. Just simply more resources and selection and trialing. So.
Do we have time for one more, Perry?
Sorry, well, just let me follow up on that, Skermatis, because I know you're not satisfied with that answer. Let me say several $1 million and several years. That's kind of our time frame we're looking at here. There's going to be sequences of development and small progress every year, but the real value is probably 3 years, 4, and then continually on after that. You can always keep working on it, right? But we're already talking about a 50% increase kind of number, and Jeff had alluded to doubling, which is kind of the critical milestone. So it's a multi-year project, and it's horrendously expensive. I was shocked by the dollar amounts, but it's not unusual. They cost the same when they did this with canola and corn and all these sorts of things. So it's not inappropriately expensive relative to other crops, but it's big money, more than any individual company can take on, or more even any individual association. It's a collaborative effect. So it's really important that we all work together to achieve that. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just curious. Do you guys ever see a world where a GMO hemp would satisfy Bill C-474 and essentially be released? Like, currently right now, this is a pretty heavy standard to not allow that to happen. Do you see that being opposition to traditional breeding?
I opened that can of worms. I guess I feel responsible for. So the U.S. there's a company in the U.S. has developed a GMO hemp variety that's come against a lot of pushback, essentially, from the marketplace. And I think Canadian-wise, we take a look at Triffid flax as a prime example of something that went inordinately bad. I'm not an enemy of the GMO. I grow GMO crops, so I don't want to be seen as speaking out of one side of my hat or farmer hat. As a farmer, I enjoy growing canola that I can look after efficiently and financially responsibly, but I'm certainly aware of the market and what we need to establish there and the market sensitivity around that. So we tread lightly.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, if anybody's got any further questions, you can grab these guys, through the rest of the morning here, and we'll turn it back to Perry, so we'll try to keep on time here. Thank you all.
Thanks, Russ.